Hello everyone, this is Leo from the Monkeys Making Misplays, and now that Divine Z's first set, Fated Clash, is officially released, we wanted to start doing set reviews to help both new and old players understand what is in each set. We will be doing one nation per video to better spread out the cards and not end up with an hour-long video. We will be providing timestamps for each of the 5 categories we've divided the cards into, which may change depending on the set, but for now those categories are New Ride Lines, Quick Start Deck Support, which will change to Divine Z Support after this set, Overdress Support, which is support for any of the ride lines from Overdress, Generic Support, and then finally we have Reprints and Promos. Alright, whether you're starting here or continuing from the Branke video, let's discard the cards in Dark States. The new ride line in this nation is Android and the Direful Dolls, which have now become an official archetype. The deck received a total of 6 cards, not counting the starter, but it is important to mention that the starter has Direful Doll in its name, so it would be beneficial to use it in the deck, as Android has an ability to call Direful Dolls. But let's start with the ride line. Unlike Welstra, the ride line for this deck has more uses than just being in the ride deck, starting with the grade 1 Serenella that lets you check top 7 for 2 cards with Direful Dolls in their names and put them into soul when it's written by the grade 2. A great effect for filtering, but she has another effect. Her second effect says that when she attacks or boosts, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater unit with Direful Doll in its name, she gains plus 5k and then binds herself at the end of the battle. The mechanics for the decks show themselves here with the binding and selective soul charging. You want to bind and soul charge dolls to do more effects, and that's where we will move on to the grade 2 Griselda that says when she's read upon by a grade 3 card with Direful Doll in its card name, you can call her to rearguard. Again, a simple effect, but she has one more, just like Serenella. Her second effect allows you to put a card with Direful Doll from your hand into soul when she's placed on rearguard if your Vanguard is a Direful Doll itself. She will then allow you to draw a card and give herself and Vanguard a plus 5k power boost. Here we see more of that selective soul charging and a little bit of power, but let's talk about the main unit of this deck to properly understand the strategy. Android, the master of the Direful Dolls, has 2 abilities. The first lets you counterblast one to choose up to the same number of Direful Dolls from soul as the grade of your opponent's Vanguard and call them to rearguard. If you call 3 dolls, he gains an extra drive. A nice effect to help with going second and being able to make a board every turn for a CB isn't that bad. His second effect is another instance of defense abilities on Vanguard, which is something that I and Kat personally really think is something Bushy should try to do a little bit more often. I know sometimes people feel like some units are just made too defensive and they don't really have any aggressive power. But let's look at his skill that says when he is attacked, you can call a bound Direful Doll to Guardian Circle and he gains plus 5k shield. And this isn't in a once per turn ability, so you can use it for each attack. Obviously you can only use 1 doll per each attack, but it still gets you some help with guarding. You know, you'll always have some extra cards. The cards will be going to bind, so you know you'll have pretty effects. But now let's move on to the support units to see just how easily it'll be to bind Direful Dolls. We'll start with the grade 1 Pelagia, who is your cycling unit, so to speak. Her first effect activates when she boosts. If your Vanguard is a Direful Doll, she can find herself and put 2 cards with Direful Doll in their names from drop to soul. So she will recycle your dolls back after you use them to guard or discard them for any cost, or you know, things like that. Her second effect is just 5k shield if your Vanguard is a Direful Doll, but alongside Android's effect, this means she'll become a 15k shield, which I don't think anyone would complain about. I mean, it's just essentially it's comparable to a trigger, which is pretty good. The next unit is the grade 2 Providenza, who provides the deck with its multi-attack. The first ability being a plus 10k power when she attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, while your Vanguard is a grade 3 Direful Doll. Her second effect allows you to Energy Blast 3 and bind herself at the end of the battle she attacks to call a Direful Doll with a different name from soul to rearguard. Your Vanguard has to be a grade 3 or greater Direful Doll, so no early game rush unfortunately, but at least you have a total of 5 attacks, which means you can be both aggressive and defensive. This is a perfect example of giving a deck a defensive ability, but also being able to give it maybe not a always possible multi-attack, but at least you have the option, right? I mean, you're only going to have 4 copies of this. It's probably going to be a hassle to, you know, cycle them back into soul, but it does, you know, give you access to at least a 4th attack every turn, right? If you are conservative about it, if you only want to do 1, or it gives you access to 5 attacks if you have 2 copies of this. And then we have the last unit, which is a grade 3, and that is Liberata. They can be put a Direful Doll from drop into soul when placed on rearguard circle or guardian circle while your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater Direful Doll. So even more recycling, which gives it being used as a shield an upside, right? I mean, it's just going to be a 5k shield, but Maybe if you're going first, you will have your opponent doing some smaller attacks since they won't have access to Persona Ride. So maybe you can just use this as a 5k shield to get yourself some cards back. She does have a second effect that allows you to give her plus 10k when she attacks if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, but if you do, she will bind herself at the end of that battle. But you can counterblast 1 to draw a card when this happens. So with almost no other CB usage in the deck, you should be able to draw some extra cards with this quite often. I mean, you're only looking at CB usage, which Android and this, so that's going to be pretty easy for you to be like a little bit more liberal with your CB. So definitely a good deck. There will be better Direful Dolls in set 2 from what I've seen that will help the deck flush out, because currently the non-Divine Z Direful Dolls aren't that great. We have some that are pretty okay, but again, you're pretty much just playing what the Divine Z gave you and then trying to figure out what to play in the other like 8 slots. But with that, we end this section, and we'll now be moving on to the quick start section. In this section, we'll be talking about the support for Asa Largest, the Dark States quick start deck, who received a total of 4 cards, with 3 being effect versions of the ones in the quick start decks. You'll start to notice a trend as we get further along in these videos that a lot of the cards are going to be pretty much copy paste with slight variations. But I mean, I have to talk about them because, you know, I don't know if people are going to be watching all the videos. They'll maybe just be watching 1 or 2 and then that's it. But the first thing that we are going to discuss is the featuring Balancer, which is the grade 1 for the ride line. When he is rode upon by Nebuchador, you can soul charge 2 and your Vanguard gains plus 5k. It also gains plus 5k on rearguard if your Vanguard is also largest, just like the one we mentioned for Astrum. The next is the grade 2 Nebuchador, which we just saw reference in the first grade 1, that lets you draw a card when it's rode upon by a grade 3 also largest, as long as you have 4 more cards in soul, which, you know, you'll have because of the grade 1 ability. And then similarly to the Astrum grade 1, it gains plus 10k shield if your Vanguard is also largest. The ride line isn't anything crazy, but hey, let's take a look at the non-ride line units. The first is a grade 2 full pigment dragon that can, on attack, CB1 and put another front row rearguard into soul to draw your card if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with also largest. This means you can clear rearguard circles during the battle phase to call with also largest ability. So, and it's also a great way to keep your units safe by putting them into soul, with also largest being able to at least call 1 a turn. You can keep a unit safe, right? And then the last supporting unit is the backup grade 3 for also largest, and that is Tyrigan, who isn't quite as good as Astrum's, right? I don't believe Tyrigan is going to be necessary for the deck strategy. You could definitely find yourself something better to play, but if you are just trying to do an upgrade from just the Divine Z stuff, you know, definitely play it. No real downside to it. But let's look at the effects. Its first effects require you move it from rearguard to soul, have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with also largest, and then soul blast 2 cards with different names from it to then draw a card. This is a lot of hurdles to just draw a card. And then if we look back at the one for Astrum, all it asked for was for it a CB and being placed from hand. But we have to look at its second effect to properly gauge the use of Tyrigan. So when this unit attacks, you can soul blast 1 to have it gain plus 5k. But if you soul blast a grade 3 or greater also largest, you can have it gain plus 15k instead. I don't think you play this at 4, but it is a good attacker once you Persona Ride. It becomes a 38k attacker, but it's just nothing great. I mean, we will see as we move through the nations that this might be one of the worst backup grade 3s, with it not really doing anything special. You know, we saw Astrum being able to bring in a 5th attack, a sneak peek ahead, but the Dragon Empire one gains a crit. The Stoichea one will also give the deck access to 5 attacks. You know, even Marlene's grade 3 is pretty much similar to this, but it's got easier hurdles for drawing the card, so it's not awful. You know, the Keter one is also incredibly strong. So I think, unfortunately, if I had to rank a worse grade 3 or backup grade 3 for the quick start decks, I think Tyrigan would be at the bottom of that list. But with that, we have finished the quick start deck section, and we will move on to the Overdress section. In this section, we have a total of 3 cards for Greed On. Not specific whether it's for Greed On or Greed On masks. I think they're pretty much interchangeable. So none of these are specific to either one. Obviously, there's probably going to be some that are more useful in one version than the other. But we'll start with the grade 1 Gojo, who can, when put into soul from rearguard, energy blast 3 to return itself to hand as long as your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater Greed On. So again, we see that not specific to either or. It also gains plus 5k shield if your damage zone has 4 or more cards and your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater unit with Greed On, which means the effects synergize with each other, right? You're gonna be able to get this into your hand when it gets sucked in for Greed On's ability, and then you can use it to guard, you know, once you're at 4 or more damage. I don't know if this is gonna be a good enough ability. You know, it's just gonna be able to come back. I guess it'll give you the ability to have more in hand for, you know, some of your other Desire Devils, but I think this is maybe not a good enough effect. But then we have the grade 2 Arakre, the Punching Dragon, who a lot of people say the art is kind of weird. I don't know, it looks like Desire Devil art to me, so I'm not really too confused on it, but some people say it kind of looks like a different art style than a lot of the other cards. But his ability is when he's placed on rearguard during the main phase, you can energy blast 3 to call Desire Devil with a different name from soul to rearguard. This means you can use any Desire Devils that get sucked into soul, or have to use you know, or have to be put in there. You can call out the ride line stuff, things like that. And it lets you only have to commit 1 card from your hand to make a board, right? You need at least 4 Desire Devils for the original Greed On. So with this, you would only need to commit this and then another 2 cards from hand, right? Then his second ability is a bit weaker, but you do get to give him and Greed On plus 5k when Greed On attacks. Araki only gains the power if you have 4 more cards in damage, and the ability only triggers once per turn while Araki is in the front row. The power gain on Araki isn't great, but it being able to just sit there and passively boost Greed On is quite nice. If you're playing Greed On Mask, then you might appreciate it. Being able to gain power for itself as well, since, you know, Greed On Mask doesn't really suck in the rear guard, all the rear guard Greed Ons, and it has a total of 4 attacks, right? And the last card we got is the grade 3 Dokusen, who when placed on rear guard lets you choose a card with Greed On or Desire Devil from drop, put it into soul. Then if your soul has 4 more cards with either name in it, Dokusen gets plus 5. Again, power gains in Greed On aren't great, but if you're not giving the power to Greed On himself, that power gain is pretty much going to be irrelevant. But this is a nice way to set up your 3 Vanguard swing turns by setting up correct pieces in your soul. Definitely got some interesting effects, but I think probably only Arakre will see any play. But I'm not a Greed On player, so maybe there's more to do with these cards. I know Kat really liked some of them, so we might see what he does with that. And with that, we have finished the Overdress section, and we'll be now moving on to the generic section. In this section, we have a total of 7 cards, and we will start with the Cycler, which for Dark States is Tiskar. So similar to the set 10 Cyclers, when it's discarded from hand while riding from the right deck, you can Counter Blast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to draw a card. However, unlike those original Cyclers, you can also use this ability when it's placed on Guardian Circle, which means you get to replace it for free and maybe draw into a bigger shield. So if your deck doesn't use energy, you can just use these, right? They're definitely going to be pretty good in non-energy using decks, but as we move forward, a lot of the decks will probably get energy cards, which will maybe reduce the use of these in some decks, but they're still pretty good. One thing is that these Cyclers don't put themselves on the bottom of decks, so once they're discarded or used to guard, you will have to find another way to get them back, and just like the OG Cyclers, they require you Persona Ride for their second effect, which is when Tiskar is placed on rearguard circle, if you Persona Road, you can Counter Blast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to Soul Charge 1 and then give it boost and plus 5k power. Not the most powerful effect, but it is a way to get yourself some extra soul and a 15k booster, as well as a lot of the Dark States decks not really wanting to use the other Cyclers as a Soul Blast. So if you're not playing any Soul or any energy cards, then using the energy Cyclers in a Dark States deck probably has a much higher upside than, you know, something like that. But again, this is just a 15k booster that gives you an extra soul. It's fine. I think these cards are definitely worth picking up regardless of what deck you play. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I myself missed out on picking up the Senten Cyclers, and I've regretted that deeply since, so please don't make that mistake. Maybe these cards aren't, phenomenal right now, but you don't know when a deck will come out and just absolutely take advantage of them. And then now that we're done with that, we'll move on to the grade 1 cycle for this set, which for Dark States is Rainbow Blower. This grade 1 unit can counterblast 1 if you Persona Row to Soul Charge 1, then call a card from Soul to, and then it gains plus 10k power. It's quite a pretty strong ability with it being able to provide Soul and Power all for a single CB. I think this is a definite pickup if you're playing Dark States. It being a double rare means it should be pretty affordable. I know some people have been talking about the ratios in the set, but I think this might still be a pretty decent pickup. Now we're going to talk about the orders we got in the set. There was a Blitz and a Normal, which is pretty much what they did for all of the nations. The Normal order allows you to Energy Blast 2 to give your Vanguard an ability that says that when your Vanguard hits a Vanguard, you can call a card from Soul to Rearguard. This means you can perform multi-attacks in deck like Baphometes and Altar Slaughter that have to either find an alternate way to do multi-attack, like Baphometes using the Desire Devil cards, or have any access to it like Altar Slaughter. It still requires you hit, but hey, at least those decks will not have a option or a chance to perform extra attacks. Then we have the Blitz order, which costs Energy Blast 2 and lets you choose a unit card without Sentinel or OT from Soul and call it to Guardian Circle. The called unit then gains plus 10k shield. Nothing crazy here, but if you want to use for energy in your deck, you can't go wrong with either of these orders. I definitely think that Energy Blast 2 normal order is pretty good. But let's quickly talk about the 3 cards I said back in the Brand Gate deck video that we will be talking about in every one of these, and that is the 3 ones from the start deck that kind of just got their effect versions in this set. First up, we've got Yujuan, which is the grade 1 that when it boosts, if your Soul has 5 or more cards in it, you can counterblast 1 and Energy Blast 2 to draw a card and gains plus 5k. Again, this ability is going to be pretty much the same across all the versions, except the condition changes. So for this one, you have to have 5 or more cards in Soul, which again, it's sort of supposed to work with Asa Largest, so that's why it's asking for Soul. The next grade 1 is Sian Kangamato, which when discarded during the red phase, you can call it to Rearguard as Rest. Again, this effect is going to be same across all the other versions of these. Then the last card is the grade 2 Rupture Colossus. It lets you Soul Blast 2 to draw a card when it's discarded from hand during the red phase. Again, effect's going to be identical across the board. So, these are just some good, nice cards that you can consider playing. But with that, we have concluded the generic section. Some pretty good stuff, I will say. That order is definitely good. I think the Cycler maybe seems underwhelming, but it not using Soul's got to be such a huge upside. Rainbow Blower's a really good card. But let's move on to the last sections, which is reprints and promos. So for this last section, we've got a total of 3 cards, 2 of them being reprints and then 1 of them being a promo. The first reprints are obviously the OT and then the PGs. Dark States Overtrigger, very good card, nothing to complain here. Then we've got the PGs, which again, they're technically not the reprints of the original Perfect Guards, but they're the exact same effects. They've just got different names, but that's it. I don't think any of them have like any deck that they synergize with or have like a unique component to it. So they're essentially just reprints. And then the last card we got in the section is the promo, which is Servant Falcracia, a card that sees plays in things like Jejuled, Chrono Jet, Time Stamping Dragon, if you wanted to talk about it. It's a very good card. This is both a reprint and a promo, but it's not a cute new card, so I'm not really going to talk too much about it. But it is just nice to get it. I think it was getting like very expensive. But with that, we have finished Dark States, and I hope to see you all in the Dragon Empire video. So far, from what I've seen, the Brandgate deck video is doing pretty well, so I'm hoping that all of these can help people both learn about the new cards in the set and do pretty well on YouTube. It always makes me feel a little happy when the videos that I put so much effort into do well.